Imagine a teenager stumbling into your town square, barely able to walk, speaking only 2 sentences, and claiming he'd been locked in darkness his entire life. May 26, 1828. Nuremberg, Germany. A strange figure appears on Unschlittplatz, a boy, maybe 16 years old, dressed in peasant clothes, clutching a letter. When approached, he can only repeat 2 phrases, "I want to be a horseman like my father," and "horse. Horse." But here's what made this case legendary. When authorities tried to question him, they discovered something that would launch one of history's most enduring mysteries. This wasn't just any lost teenager. This was someone who seemed to have materialized from another world entirely. Who was Kaspar Hauser? And why does his story still send chills down the spines of historians nearly 200 years later? The evidence. Let me paint you the scene that witnesses described that day. Picture this teenager pale as moonlight, with an awkward, shuffling gait, as if walking itself was foreign to him. His hands were soft, unmarked by labor. Most unsettling of all? His pupils contracted violently in daylight, as if he'd never seen the sun. The letter he carried was addressed to a cavalry captain, written in broken German, claiming the boy had been left in the writer's care as an infant and kept hidden away. But when authorities examined Kaspar more closely, they uncovered details that would fuel centuries of speculation. According to the documented testimonies, and these are recorded in the Nuremberg City Archives, Kaspar claimed he had spent his entire conscious life in a dark cell, approximately 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. He said he'd been fed only bread and water, never seeing another human face except for a mysterious man who would occasionally appear to change his straw bedding. Dr. Georg Friedrich Daumer, who became Kaspar's guardian and documented his early development, noted something extraordinary in his published observations. Kaspar could see perfectly in near total darkness, could hear the faintest sounds from great distances, and possessed an almost supernatural sensitivity to metals. He could allegedly detect different metals through touch alone. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Historical records show that Kaspar learned language at an unprecedented rate. Within months, he was speaking fluent German and began sharing increasingly detailed accounts of his imprisonment. He described being visited by the man who taught him to write his name and the phrase about becoming a horseman, but never explained why he'd been kept captive. The medical examinations documented by Dr. Albert and reported in contemporary newspapers revealed physical anomalies consistent with prolonged confinement, unusually developed leg muscles from constant sitting, calluses in specific patterns, and that haunting sensitivity to light that witnesses consistently reported. And then came the attempts on his life. Yes, you heard that right. In 1829, Kaspar was found bleeding in Daumer's cellar, claiming he'd been attacked by a masked man. 5 years later, in 1833, he staggered home with a fatal stab wound to the chest, gasping that the same man had attacked him in a public park, handing him a note that read, "Hauser will be able to tell you quite precisely how I look and from where I am." To save Hauser the effort, "I want to tell you myself from where I come. I come from the Bavarian border on the river. My name is Emilio Umlaut." Contrasting viewpoints, the skeptics. But wait, before we crown this the mystery of the century, let's examine what the skeptics discovered. Because not everyone bought Kaspar's story, and their arguments are pretty compelling. Professor Julius Joly of Heidelberg University conducted one of the first systematic investigations and published findings that raised serious questions. He noted inconsistencies in Kaspar's accounts, details that changed over time, knowledge he shouldn't have possessed if truly isolated, and behaviors that seem, well, a bit too convenient. Here's what really made investigators suspicious. Kaspar displayed remarkable knowledge of religious concepts, social customs, and even specific German dialects that would have been impossible to acquire during his alleged confinement. When pressed on these inconsistencies, his explanations often shifted or became vague. The forensic analysis of the letters, both the original one and the note found after his final attack, revealed something intriguing. Handwriting experts noted similarities to Kaspar's own writing style, suggesting he might have authored them himself. Even more damning, chemical analysis of his clothing showed no signs of the prolonged wear one would expect from someone who'd supposedly worn the same outfit for years in captivity. Dr. Albert von Zimmern, who examined the case files decades later, proposed what became known as the fraud hypothesis. His research, published in medical journals of the era, suggested that Kaspar might have been a runaway apprentice or abandoned child who invented his captivity story to gain sympathy and support. The timeline of his appearances in various towns before reaching Nuremberg suggested a more mundane journey than his mysterious materialization. Some historians point to economic motives. Kaspar's story generated significant public interest, donations, and patronage. Was this elaborate performance art designed to secure a comfortable life? Finding deeper truth. So where does this leave us? Here's what I find absolutely fascinating about this case: both sides present compelling evidence, yet neither fully explains everything we know happened. Let's consider this. Maybe the truth isn't choosing between mysterious prince or clever fraud. What if Kaspar Hauser represents something more complex about human nature and society itself? Think about this: whether Kaspar was telling the truth or not, his case reveals something profound about 19th century Germany. This was a period of intense social upheaval, political uncertainty, and rapid change. People were hungry for mystery, for stories that challenged the rational order of things. But here's what really gets me thinking. Modern psychological research has shown us that extreme trauma, particularly childhood isolation, can produce exactly the kinds of symptoms and behaviors Kaspar displayed. Dr. Bruce Perry's work on childhood trauma and Dr. Michael Rutter's studies on Romanian orphans have documented cases where severe deprivation creates lasting neurological changes, heightened sensory awareness, difficulty with social interaction, and fragmented memory patterns. Could Kaspar have experienced some form of severe neglect or abuse that his mind processed into the captivity narrative? Could he have been a victim of circumstances so traumatic that creating an alternative story became a psychological necessity? Or consider this angle: what if elements of both explanations are true? What if Kaspar did experience some form of confinement or abuse, but embellished or altered details either due to trauma-induced memory issues or to make his story more compelling to potential benefactors? The attacks on his life remain the most puzzling element. If he was a fraud, why would someone want him dead? If he was telling the truth, who had the motive and means to silence him? The final note, regardless of who wrote it, suggests someone wanted this mystery to end permanently. Challenging all of you. But this case forces us to confront bigger questions that go way beyond one mysterious teenager in 19th century Germany. How do we determine truth when the only witness is the person making the claim? In our age of social media and viral stories, how often do we encounter modern-day Kaspar Hausers, people whose extraordinary claims capture our imagination, but resist simple verification? And here's something that keeps me up at night thinking about this case. What does our fascination with Kaspar Hauser say about us? Why are we so drawn to stories of hidden identities, secret imprisonments, and mysterious origins? Is it because, deep down, we all sometimes feel like strangers in our own world? Think about it: in an age where we're more connected than ever, why do so many people feel isolated, misunderstood, or trapped by circumstances beyond their control? Are we all, in some sense, Kaspar Hausers trying to make sense of a world that often seems alien and incomprehensible? But here's the question that really challenges me. Does it matter if Kaspar was telling the truth? His story sparked conversations about child welfare, human rights, and the treatment of the mentally ill that led to real social reforms. Sometimes the power of a narrative transcends its literal truth. What if asking "Was Kaspar Hauser real?" is the wrong question entirely? What if the right question is, what does the story of Kaspar Hauser reveal about the human condition? Because whether he was a lost prince, a clever fraud, or a traumatized child creating meaning from chaos, his story touches something universal about the human experience: our need for identity, belonging, and understanding in a world full of mysteries. And maybe that's why, nearly 200 years later, we're still talking about a teenager who appeared from nowhere on a German street corner. Maybe Kaspar Hauser's greatest mystery isn't who he was, it's what he represents about all of us. So what do you think? Was Kaspar Hauser history's most elaborate con artist, or was he exactly who he claimed to be? And more importantly, does it change how his story affects you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.